Hello Physics 2 Lab students. My name is Alex. I'm one of your LAs for this semester. I will be giving you a brief introduction onto the information that you will need to know going into your first virtual lab, starting with a list of materials. So, once you have collected your envelopes of materials from the lab and opening the contents of this bag, you will see several electrical components. The first thing you may notice is 2 sheets of conductive paper. This is conductive paper, but remember that it just has a considerable amount of resistance, so you won't short out a power supply. Next, you have conductive copper tape. This is for you to put on the conductive paper so that you can perform your experiments. Just know that you only have a limited amount of this, so all I would have to say for this is go ahead in your labs and see all the places that you would need to use it, and then put some aside for the later labs. But you should have plenty to work with. We also have a 9-volt battery with a little bit of tape over the terminals. We have tape over the terminals because, fun fact, you can actually start fires with 9-volt batteries. So, unless you intend to start a fire with 9-volt batteries, just keep the terminals away from loose metal or conductive materials when you're not using it. And then you should be fine. Next, we have the terminal connector for the 9-volt battery. It just snaps onto the end of the battery. You have 2 alligator clips, which you will use to connect to the copper tapes on the conductive paper, and a voltmeter. Now I'll go into how the voltmeter works in just a moment. But for now, just know that the rest of the supplies in your envelope are for later labs. You do not need them on this lab. Now, back to the voltmeter. I'll go ahead and unplug these terminals and briefly describe how this works. It may look a little overwhelming at first, but just know that all we're working with right now is electrical potential difference, also known as voltage. Voltage on this device is indicated with the letter V. So you have several positions around this dial where you have a range of voltages. So the first range is from 200 millivolts to 2000 millivolts, and then lastly 20 volts. So since we're using a 9-volt battery, the voltage range that makes the most sense is 0 volts to 20 volts. And make sure that you are also on the direct current, which is indicated by a solid line next to the voltage, next to the V. Direct current is the type of current that your battery will supply. We will go into other currents later, but for now we are working with 20 volts of direct current. So with that, you have 3 ports on the bottom of this. You'll only be using 2 of them, and you have 2 leads that plug into them. So you have a red lead and a black lead. It is electrical convention that you use the black lead for ground or negative terminals, or in the case of the multimeter, it is indicated by common or COM for short. So I will plug the black cable in there. The next, I will plug my red cable into where I am reading a voltage, which is above the port indicated by a V. Now that you have your terminals set up, just note that the wires are exactly the same aside from the color. Just stick to one and be consistent. Now, the first part of your lab, I believe, tells you to measure the voltage of the battery itself. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your battery, your multimeter on the setting you've set it, peel back the tape, and then hook up the probes to the battery. It doesn't matter which one you hook up to where, but you will get a negative reading versus a positive reading of the same magnitude. So upon application, I get a value reading of 9.93 volts of electricity. And then if I switch the terminal, it should be 9.93, but negative. And it is. And then that is all you need to know for the voltmeter. Lastly, as for working through your labs, I can't think of every possible question you may develop in the process of working through your labs. So with this in mind, go ahead and get a head start on your labs, and the more time you have from the due date, you can ask the questions you develop to your LAs, which are available to you on Zoom through their office hours indicated in D2L or your regularly scheduled lab times. So, lastly, that is pretty much the gist of all you need to know going into your first lab. Thank you, and remember to have fun.